The 1st of September, 1939. After a false accusation that the Poles attacked a German radio station, Nazi Germany launches a retaliatory campaign against Poland, triggering World War II. After defeating the Polish army, the Germans ruthlessly suppressed the Poles, whom they considered to be racially inferior. And in the weeks that followed the German attack on Poland, German SS, police, and military units shoot thousands of Polish civilians, including many members of the Polish nobility, clergy, and intelligentsia. In the fall of 1941, Nazi Germany begins to implement a plan, codenamed Operation Reinhard, to systematically murder almost 2 million Jews living in the German-administered territory of occupied Poland, called the General Government. 3 killing centers are established as part of this plan: Bełżec, Sobibor, and Treblinka. One of the main perpetrators of this operation becomes Christian Wirth. Christian Wirth was born on the 24th of November, 1885, in Oberbalsheim, then part of the German Empire. After completing his education, Wirth was employed as an apprentice carpenter at a timber company in Oberbalsheim, and from 1905 to 1910 he served his military duty with the Grenadier Regiment 123 in Ulm. In 1910, he married Maria Bantel, with whom he had 2 sons, and then moved to Stuttgart, where he worked as a police detective. The First World War began on the 28th of July, 1914. In October the same year, Wirth volunteered to serve in the army of Kaiser Wilhelm II and saw action on the Western Front in Flanders and northern France. Christian Wirth distinguished himself in battle, was wounded, and highly decorated for bravery. The First World War ended on the 11th of November, 1918, when the German leaders signed the armistice in the Compiègne forest in France. In June of the following year, Wirth returned to Stuttgart and a short time later was promoted back to police detective sergeant. He earned a reputation for solving difficult tasks, often by using brutal methods of interrogation. After World War I ended, Germany experienced great political turmoil. The 1919 Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh terms on Germany, which had lost the war. In addition, the country saw the overthrow of its monarchy. In its place was a new Weimar Republic, a democratic government. Racist and anti-Semitic groups sprang up on the radical right, and they falsely claimed that Jews and communists were to blame for Germany's problems. One such group was the Nazi Party, which Wirth joined in 1923, becoming one of its original members. When Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power in January 1933, they made the stab-in-the-back myth an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, which maintained that the Imperial German Army did not lose World War I on the battlefield, but was instead betrayed by certain citizens on the home front, especially Jews and revolutionary socialists, an integral part of their official history of the 1920s. The Nazis denounced the German government leaders, who had signed the armistice on the 11th of November 1918, as the November criminals who had stabbed the nation in the back in order to seize power. Historians inside and outside of Germany unanimously reject the myth, pointing out that the Imperial German Army was out of reserves, was being overwhelmed by the entrance of the United States into the war, and had already lost the war militarily by late 1918. In 1933, Wirth joined the SA, and in 1937 was recruited by the SD, Reinhard Heydrich Security Service, as an agent, spying and informing on his party and police comrades. On the 10th of August 1939, Wirth transferred from the SA to the SS, attaining the rank of Obersturmführer, which was equivalent to first lieutenant. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. The last operational Polish unit surrendered on the 6th of October. The German occupation of Poland was exceptionally brutal. The Nazis considered Poles to be racially inferior, and they launched a campaign of terror intended to destroy the Polish nation and culture, and to reduce the Poles to a leaderless population of peasants and workers laboring for German masters. In the end of 1939, Wirth started to work for the Nazi Euthanasia Program, codenamed T-4, which was the systematic murder of institutionalized patients with disabilities in Germany. The patients were transported by bus or by rail into 6 killing centers where they were murdered. In these centers, the Nazis gassed, shot, or killed by lethal injections those who were deemed unworthy of life, such as residents of welfare institutions, some concentration camp inmates, the chronically sick, the mentally and physically disabled, homosexuals, and even sick German soldiers. In December 1939 or January 1940, Wirth was present when 20 to 30 German mental patients were subjected to the first known gassing experiment using carbon monoxide. This was where the idea to disguise the gas chambers as showers was introduced. Wirth continued to participate as a troubleshooter in the T-4 killing centers. For instance, when at Brandenburg Killing Center, a group of suspecting mental patients refused to enter the disguised gas chamber, Wirth coaxed them into the room by telling them that they had to enter in order to receive clothing. On another occasion, when 4 female patients at Hartheim Killing Center were suspected of having contracted typhus, Wirth shot them to prevent the spread of the disease to the staff. In the second half of 1940, Wirth was promoted to become the head of the Euthanasia Program in Germany and Austria. Franz Stangl, the commandant of Sobibor and Treblinka extermination camps, described Wirth in 1971 interview, saying, "When he spoke about the necessity of this euthanasia operation, he was not speaking in humane or scientific terms. He laughed. He spoke of doing away with the useless mouths, and that sentimental slobber about such people made him puke." The T-4 program predated the genocide of the European Jewry, the Holocaust, by approximately 2 years. Historians estimate that the program claimed the lives of 250,000 men, women, and children. In the fall of 1941, Nazi Germany implemented a plan to systematically murder the 2 million Jews living in German-occupied Poland. This plan was codenamed Operation Reinhard, and as part of this action, 3 killing centers were established: Bełżec, Sobibor, and Treblinka. Because of his experience in the T-4 program, in December 1941, Wirth was sent to the Bełżec concentration camp, where he worked as a commandant. It was during his time at the Bełżec camp that Wirth earned his nickname Christian the Savage. He was so called by the SS staff because of his extreme, unforgiving approach to his work. Wirth ran the Bełżec death camp with an iron grip and was feared by the staff, Germans, and Ukrainians alike. Werner Dubois, an SS guard at Bełżec, described him as follows: "Wirth was more than brutal. In my opinion, his brutality was grounded more in his human nature than his political mentality. He bellowed, screamed, and threatened us, and hit members of the German garrison in the face. There was no one at Bełżec who was not afraid of Wirth. In Bełżec, he established the regime of terror and death, which was carried out in all Operation Reinhard camps, more than any other camp commander." During his time at Bełżec, Wirth carried out experiments to determine the most efficient methods of handling the transports of Jews from the time of their arrival at the camp until their murder and burial. He developed some basic concepts for the process of extermination and for camp structure. The basic structure of the camp and the various actions the victims were made to do as soon as they left the train were intended to ensure that they would not grasp the fact that they had been brought for extermination. The aim was to give the victims the impression that they had arrived at a labor camp or a transit camp, from where they would be sent to a labor camp. The deportees were to believe this until they were closed into the gas chambers, which were camouflaged as baths. The second principle of the extermination process was that everything should be carried out with the utmost speed. The victims should be rushed in, made to run, so that they would not have time to look around, to reflect, or to understand what was going on. This also supported the basic principle of deceiving the victims. They should be shocked and their reactions paralyzed in order to prevent escape or resistance. In order to achieve this, Wirth decided that newly arrived prisoners to be murdered should be beaten with whips incessantly to drive them into the gas chambers, thus creating a sense of panic and terror in which the prisoners felt forced to comply. The speed of the extermination process served yet an additional purpose. It increased the killing capacity of the camp. More transports could be brought and annihilated in one day. According to Wirth's annihilation scheme, the Jews themselves should carry out all physical work involved in the extermination process of a transport. After ensuring that Bełżec was operating efficiently, on the 1st of August 1942, Wirth was appointed to the post of Inspector of Operation Reinhard camps and was based at the headquarters of Operation Reinhard, on the old airfield just outside Lublin and close to the Majdanek concentration camp. Beginning in March 1942, Jews from various parts of the general government, which was an annexed territory of Poland run by German authorities, were deported to Bełżec, where they were murdered in gas chambers with carbon monoxide gas generated by large diesel engines. On one occasion, Wirth would whip the Jewish prisoners to get them into the gas chambers, while he also beat a guard who had failed to start up the engine, which was to release the carbon monoxide into the chamber. Rudolf Reder, a survivor from Bełżec, described Wirth as follows: He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his middle 40s with a vulgar face. He was a born criminal, the extreme beast. The authorities at the Bełżec killing center consisted of a small staff of 20 to 30 German SS and police officials. Between March and December 1942, when the last transport of people arrived, the Germans deported approximately 434,500 Jews and an undetermined number of Poles and Roma people to Bełżec, where they were killed. When the camp was liquidated in June 1943, the Jewish forced laborers were either shot or deported to the Sobibor killing center to be gassed. Bełżec was the third deadliest extermination camp, exceeded only by Treblinka and Auschwitz. Only 7 Jews performing slave labor with the camp's Sonderkommando, special detachments working in the killing area, survived World War II. The lack of viable witnesses able to testify about the camp's operation is the primary reason why Bełżec is little known, despite the victim number count. After the Bełżec camp was dismantled, the Germans plowed over the site, and they built a manor house and planted trees and crops to disguise the area as a farm. A former auxiliary police guard was placed on the site to farm the property in order to further camouflage the site. During the construction of Sobibor in the spring of 1942, Wirth visited the incomplete site and conducted an experimental gassing of 25 Jewish slave laborers. He liked to carry a whip, and he used it on both Jewish victims and guards. When the transport of 40 to 60 freight cars arrived at the Sobibor railway station, only 20 cars at a time were taken into the camp, while the rest of the victims remained locked in the rail cars. The victims were then brought into the so-called arrival area, where an SS man would give a speech welcoming them, saying they had reached a transit camp on their way to the labor camps. They were also told that before embarking on the next part of their journey, they were to take showers, have their clothing disinfected, and get a meal. The men and women were separated, and the children were sent with the women. The Nazis ordered the victims to remove their clothing and hand over their valuables. The Jews were then marched on the run to the gas chambers. The honking of geese would obscure the cries of the victims, from those still sitting in the locked rail cars as they were being beaten, screamed at, and having warning shots fired at them. About 450 to 550 Jews were forced into the chambers at a time. The gas chambers were then sealed once the maximum number of victims was inside. Poisonous gas was then piped in. Within 20 to 30 minutes, all those inside were dead. Those who were too ill, weak, or elderly to make the walk to the gas chambers were shot in an open pit. From April 1942 until mid-October 1943, the German SS and their auxiliaries killed at least 167,000 people at Sobibor. From mid-August 1942, Wirth played a leading role in the reorganization of Treblinka, including the construction of the new gas chambers, and thereafter visited the camp frequently. SS Unterscharführer Franz Zuchomel testified the following about Wirth. From my activity in the camps of Treblinka and Sobibor, I remember that Wirth, in brutality, meanness, and ruthlessness, could not be surpassed. We therefore called him Christian the Terrible, or the Wild Christian. The Ukrainian guardsmen called him Stuka, which was a German dive bomber. The brutality of Wirth was so great that I personally see it as a perversity. I remember particularly that on each occasion, Wirth lashed Ukrainian guardsmen with a whip he always kept. If only someone had the courage to kill Christian Wirth, then Operation Reinhard would have collapsed. Berlin would not have found another man with such energy for evil and nastiness. Franz Stangl, former commandant of Treblinka and Sobibor, later recalled one of Wirth's inspection visits to Treblinka as Inspector of Operation Reinhard around September 1942. To tell the truth, one did become used to it. They were cargo. I think it started the first day I saw the extermination area in Treblinka. I remember Wirth standing there, next to the pits full of blue-black corpses. It had nothing to do with humanity. It could not have. It was a mass of rotting flesh. Wirth said, "What shall we do with this garbage?" I think unconsciously that started me thinking of them as cargo. From late July 1942 through September 1943, the camp personnel murdered an estimated 925,000 Jews at the Treblinka killing center. When Operation Reinhard was terminated, after 3 million Polish Jews and thousands of Gypsies were murdered, Wirth was sent to Trieste in Italy, along with other former Operation Reinhard staff. From autumn 1943, Wirth's role was to oversee the Risiera di San Sabba concentration camp, as well as to combat partisans over the border in occupied Yugoslavia. Wirth had not lost his touch or commitment to the Jewish question. and introduced the necessary accoutrement for mass murder by establishing gas van facilities and crematoria. The Nazi staff under Wirth's command continued to use the methods used in Poland, beating prisoners to death, torturing, and ordering young children to collect firewood to light the fires for their own cremation. Christian Wirth was 58 years old when he died on the 26th of May, 1944. There are two contradictory accounts of the circumstances of Wirth's death. One states that he was killed in May 1944 by Yugoslav partisans while traveling in an open-topped car on an official trip to Fiume. However, according to the previously mentioned SS commandant, Franz Stangl, who served in Trieste towards the end of the war and saw him after he had died, Christian Wirth was taken care of and killed by his own men because they despised him. Wirth was buried with full military honors in the German military cemetery in Obcina near Trieste. In 1959, his remains were transferred to the German military cemetery at Costermano near Lake Garda, northern Italy. Wirth, a man who supervised the murder of more than 1.5 million Jews, never faced justice for his crimes. There were no tears shed for Christian Wirth. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.